How are you sleeping these days? Hopefully you're sleeping really well. And if you're not, you're going to want to stay tuned to this episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. Learn all about sleep, why it's important, and how to improve it. So I'm Dr. Benjamin.
And I'm Dr. Susanna.
And welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet.
Well, first of all, we want to talk about how sleep is such a crucial part of creating a strong foundation of health. When we sleep, it's really the only time we're purely in a parasympathetic state, which is the rest and digest part of our nervous system. So when we're that relaxed, the body is able to really heal itself. And we see this in a few areas we're going to touch on today, such as autophagy. Should we start with autophagy?
Autophagy?
Autophagy.
I know it as autophagy or autophagy, but we can call it autophagy. That's fine. So maybe before we get into all of the many things that happen with sleep, maybe is that where we're starting? Sorry, yeah, that's where we'll start with all of the many things that happen when we're sleeping. So as Dr. Susanna pointed out, it's when we're in the parasympathetic state. And this is when the body is repairing and rebuilding itself. It's when we're detoxing. It's when cells are regenerating and turning over. And autophagy, as I say it, is when these cells are being broken down. It's like when the garbage dump is being taken out, when the trash is being taken out. So autophagy is kind of that self-digestion is literally what it means, eating yourself. And that's what we do when we are fasting in the fasted state. But we need to be sleeping well in order to optimize the autophagy process. But another important thing, as we're going to talk about when we get into sleep hygiene and ways to sleep better and improve your sleep, we want to make sure that we're not eating too close to bed, because then we could be interfering with our body's ability to digest itself, or autophagy.
Yeah, and what he means by digesting itself is that our cells are constantly turning over, and that's a healthy body is constantly creating new cells, new young cells, and getting rid of all of the old cells that aren't functioning as properly. So this cycle happens primarily when we sleep.
Right. And we want to make sure that autophagy is well regulated and happening, optimally, so that things like chronic diseases and specifically cancer don't occur. Because if these old cells aren't being broken down and metabolized and digested, then they can go rogue or become mutated and take on some cancer dynamics that allow them to just proliferate out of control. And obviously we don't want to do that. Autophagy is one tool that the body has to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yes. And so moving on, another thing that sleep really helps and supports healing of the body is that it helps to regulate hormones. And so one of the hormones that's really upregulated during sleep is called growth hormone. Do you want to speak a little bit about growth hormone?
Well, growth hormone is actually very closely related to the autophagy process. It's this repair hormone, and growth hormone has been studied, and a lot of people call growth hormone the longevity hormone, because higher levels of growth hormone allow our bodies to maintain resilience and flexibility of our tissues and our organs and our vascular system and things like that. Growth hormone is needed to repair and regenerate cells during the process of autophagy. And a lot of people want to supplement with things that promote growth hormone. And it's really an area of like biohacking and trying to live to be 150 through optimizing growth hormone. But when it comes down to it, the only real way to healthfully, naturally optimize growth hormone is sleeping better and sleeping regularly and sleeping consistently and optimizing your circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm. So other hormones that are regulated, oops,
We're getting a call.
we're getting a call. It's
So-
interrupting our live.
Hopefully that's all.
Okay. Other hormones that are regulated during sleep are leptin and ghrelin. And these are the hormones that are directly connected with your appetite, your sense of hunger, and your sense of satiety when you eat. So
which one's leptin?
leptin is the satiety hormone. It's upregulated after you eat a meal, and it's what makes you feel nice and satiated. Ghrelin is upregulated when you're hungry. And
The way I remember that is like ghrelin is like grr, like your stomach is growling. So ghrelin is upregulated when we're hungry. And a lot of people who have, sorry if I cut you off.
Oh, no, go.
A lot of people who have struggle with maintaining weight and overeating are seen to have leptin resistance. And the signal that's going from their brain to their stomach indicating that they're full, this leptin, the satiety hormone, isn't functioning properly. And one of the best ways to get that satiety hormone functioning properly is optimizing sleep and making sure, once again, that we're sleeping deeply and soundly and consistently. There's other things that we can do to optimize leptin. Do you want to touch on those real quick, just because they're up? Or
yes, but you
okay.
Since you brought it up,
all right,
you talk about it.
So another way that leptin sensitivity is optimized is when the stomach fills, and these stretch receptors in the stomach are signaled to the brain that the stomach is filled. And the best way to fill your stomach is eating things that are high in fiber and bulky, things like, you know, leafy greens and vegetables and even potatoes and beans and starchy things like that. They bulk up your stomach, they trigger leptin. That's one good thing. But once again, we're focusing on sleep. So sleep well to maintain optimal leptin sensitivity.
Mm-hmm. When we sleep is also the major time when the liver is able to detox and really work toxins out of your system. So it's really important that we sleep soundly throughout the night, and we're not like eating snacks throughout the night, because that interferes with the liver's ability to detoxify itself. So again, getting good long sleep is essential for detoxification.
Right. The liver is working really around the clock to clean our bodies, clean our blood, and eliminate toxins that accumulate throughout our days. But when the liver is really pumping, really grinding, is during the periods of like 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. or so, give or take. And the reason why that is because that's when the body ideally is resting and digesting. This parasympathetic activity is optimized, and that is what turns on the key that turns on your liver. You're detoxing, you're letting go of all these toxins that would otherwise be accumulating and creating like a dirty blood scenario where all sorts of diseases can proliferate when we have toxins that are accumulating and not able to flush out. So the liver is on between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. ideally, and some people can fall asleep really well. You know, they fall asleep at 9 or 10 o'clock consistently, but it's very common for people to wake up at 1 or 2 or 3 a.m. and just be kind of wired awake. And one of the reasons for that is that the liver is turning on, and it creates so much heat and it creates so much energy in the body that it awakes us. And a lot of times obviously not many of us are attuned to our liver and can feel our liver turning on and activating, but that's one of the things that can be cause for sleep disturbance or waking up in the middle of the night. So if that is a pattern that you're dealing with, maybe you should tune into some other videos on how to nourish liver and support detox pathways with food and other things. Anything else you want to say about that?
I want to move on to how to improve sleep. Now that we've talked a little bit about some of the major health benefits of getting good long sleep, it's really important to talk about how to optimize sleep, because sleep issues are a very, very common problem. And I think a big part of this is because many people get out of their normal circadian rhythm. Either they have weird sleep schedules, or they're doing a lot of screen time, which really affects the pineal gland, which is responsible for our circadian rhythm, our wake and sleep cycle. So we're going to talk about some practices called sleep hygiene that really help to get that circadian rhythm back into a normal, healthy rhythm and cycle for you.
Yeah, and a lot of people have a really dysfunctional, dysregulated circadian rhythm, and they say, "Oh, well, it's just fine. Like I'm a night owl, and I've always been, and I always will be." Or on the weekends, I stay up till 2 a.m., but I catch up, and I sleep until noon, and it's all fine. But it might feel like it's fine, but it's not the preferred state of the body. And what really happens, like what Susanna was saying, this pineal gland that is the master regulator of the circadian rhythm, what it does is it secretes a hormone called melatonin. And if our circadian rhythm is out of balance, then our melatonin levels are also going to be out of balance. And ultimately what happens is our melatonin levels kind of go down. And melatonin is one of the things that helps maintain restful sleep, but it's also one of the most powerful antioxidants that the body has. And when people's melatonin levels go down, there's a really steep increase in the risk of developing all sorts of different cancers. There's some really popular studies that have shown that night shift workers who have a totally flipped circadian rhythm, and with that comes an associated drop of melatonin, they have a really higher increased rate of developing all sorts of different cancers. So this isn't intended to scare you, and if you're a night shift worker, there's things to do to still optimize your rhythm and increase melatonin. But this is just intended to inform you and take action in your life and take control of your health. So let's dive into some sleep tips.
All right, some sleep hygiene. So the first is to establish a regular sleep schedule. And this means that you're not falling asleep one night at 10, but then the other night you're falling asleep at 2:30, and it's just all over the place and very erratic. The body likes routine. And so we've actually learned from one of our teachers that back in the day, people were prescribed bed rest many times.
Oh, yeah.
And this is actually one of those situations where bed rest can actually be very helpful. And so that means that even if you're not feeling tired around 10 p.m., which is typically a good time to fall asleep, it can still be helpful to get in bed, turn the lights off. Even if you're, just awake, you could listen to maybe a book on tape or something relaxing. And that time spent in bed is still actually going to be good rest for your body. It's going to help train your body to start winding down at that time. And then you'll be able to, get a good 8 hours or so of sleep in and just get that cycle going. It may sound kind of awful and horrible and just awkward, but what it's going to do is help get that pineal gland going in its more regular rhythm, and it's also going to help support your adrenal glands. Because when your adrenal glands are secreting cortisol at the wrong time of the day, for example, late at night, then that's also going to help keep you awake with all that adrenaline and cortisol coursing through your blood. So, so keeping a schedule is very important.
Totally. And sometimes, that this can be totally different for different people's personality. So for me personally, it's hard. It would be hard to maintain a regular schedule if Susanna wasn't present in my life. I feel like I would have to, create, set an alarm or something that reminds me to wind down, because I tend to be someone who can just depending on what I'm into or engaged with, I can get turned on late at night and get turned on in like a cortisol sort of way, not in a sexual kind of way. That's a different talk for a different day. But I can get turned on at night, and the idea is to turn off at night, and it's easier said than done, of course, but just like tricking the body essentially and just getting in bed with a book can really, maybe it'll take a half hour to an hour, but you will turn down your energy and go to sleep.
Mm-hmm. So other practices that help our bodies wind down include one that Ben actually already mentioned, and that is to stop eating about 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this can be, a lot of people struggle with midnight snack addictions and things like that. And I know all sorts of different little tools and tricks and tips to, help people stop eating at dinner time, or, we like to have a little sweet thing sometimes, or most of the time, after dinner, but not too close to bed. A lot of people are eating at like 8 or 9 o'clock and then try to go to bed at 10 o'clock, and that's just too close. And the digestive processes are going, and there's a lot of activity in the stomach and lower intestines, and things are just, it's not the perfect time to sleep right after a meal. So one of the things that we can do after a meal and after a dessert is go brush your teeth. And that kind of signifies end of consumption for the day. And then you can brush your teeth and go back to whatever it was that you were enjoying time with, family, friends, watching a TV show, whatever it may be, but you quit eating for the day. Mm-hmm. Cut it out.
Yes. And so you mentioned the next topic, TV,
screen time.
Screen time. So actually the light that's emitted from most screens does stimulate the pineal gland, which is right here in our brain. And that can create wakefulness at night. It can make it harder to wind down when we're going to bed. So we like to recommend, sometimes we're not very good at this ourselves, but we like to recommend that you certainly cut out the screens 30 minutes before you go to bed. But what would even be better is an hour or even 2 hours if sleep is a big issue for you.
For us, we sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes we do stretch our screen time closer to bed if we're working on things or engaged with things or watching something fun. But some people are really sensitive to the screen time and the activation of the nervous system and, once again, the pineal gland. But we also have a program that
an app.
It's an app or something that's installed on the computer, which changes the light that's emitted from the screen so it doesn't activate your pineal gland as much. And that app is called Flux. And we can put a link to it in alter.health/podcast or /episode 63. That's where you'll find this stuff. Next thing is creating a sleep environment that is very, very minimal in any other kind of stimuli. So we're talking about light and sound mainly. So for some people, if they're having a hard time falling asleep, it can be really helpful to get blackout curtains and create just a very, very dark environment. Even sometimes, for example, chargers have lights on them that glow in the middle of the night. That can even interfere with the pineal glands. And so you want to just really minimize any light in the room. And that also is the same for sound. Some people just have more active nervous systems at night, and the tiniest little sound can wake them up. Additionally, things that are invisible, like EMFs, some people are also sensitive to. Me personally, not so much, but sometimes, turning off the Wi-Fi router or, sleeping away from all wireless devices and things like that can actually really help people sleep. I haven't personally had so much experience with that. I haven't struggled with sleep issues, but if I did, I would try that.
Mm-hmm. And also temperature can be important for some people, making sure that the sleeping environment is cool enough. So typically keeping your thermostat at 6 to 8 degrees or lower when you go to sleep can be helpful so you don't wake up feeling overheated.
What's next?
What's next is we might be moving into thoughts.
Okay,
Let
cool.
me look at my list here.
I think we're moving into thoughts because one of the things that keeps people really wired is just simply the nature of our thinking mind, which that's what the mind does, right? It thinks. And a lot of people who struggle with insomnia or difficulty falling asleep, that gives them anxiety, and that just gives them one more thought to latch onto and take seriously, and that can really dictate what how our nervous system responds. So as we've talked about many times in the past, this mind-body connection, how our body responds to our thinking. So everybody has a different way of quieting the mind, but whatever that looks like to you, that will in effect quiet the body as well, because we want to just turn down the nervous system, turn down the stress hormones, turn down the wakefulness. And, if you imagine just like a thermostat or a switch, we're just turning it down. And, that visual might support you in coming into a more equanimous, peaceful state of mind. But there's all different sorts of practices and techniques. But in addition to practices and techniques, there's simply understanding the nature of the mind. And when we don't push into our thinking and when we don't take our thoughts seriously, they just do what they do, pass through, and we can be a neutral observer of our mind. And that can create a peaceful experience.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that a little bit more because I have intermittent, every now and then I'll have a night where my mind is just like moving at 1,000 miles an hour. And in the past, it would it would keep me up for maybe 2 or 3 hours, because in addition to just all the thoughts coming in at every second, there was this additional layer of thought I put on top of those thoughts. Like, why is this happening?
A thought sandwich.
Was it because I had more caffeine than I usually, was it because of this? Was it because, trying to figure it out. And that just created even more, stressful hormones coursing throughout my body. So now when that happens, I do the best that I can to just simply fall back, surrender, and accept the fact that that's the state of my mind right now. It's been a monkey mind, and it's not always going to be that way. And I know that in time things will calm down, and I just trust.
That's really a powerful example of just because like we were saying, the mind is going to do what it does, but I really like the visual of just putting a thought on top of all the thoughts, and that thought just piles up, and we get this thought pile, and it just becomes a mess. But really, we can have a thought without creating a thought pile. And without a thought pile, we can just be in a much more peaceful state of mind. And like we've been talking about, that corresponds to a peaceful state in the body. And that really does truly support a peaceful night's rest. And like we talked about, so important for the healing of your body.
I liked that term, thought pile. I don't think I've ever heard of thought pile before. I like that a lot.
So when you're laying in bed and you've got a thought, let it be a thought. Don't create a thought pile. And that is could be a very powerful tool in supporting you falling asleep.
Yeah, and so let's move into the realm of more kind of, I guess, the spiritual realm. Because many people before bed, they like to do some kind of contemplative practice, whether that's prayer or meditation or whatever, kind of like Ben mentioned, some visualization practices. And we have a practice ourselves of calling in spirit guides and angels and asking them for support, asking them to support us in falling asleep with ease and sleeping the night through without interruptions, and getting however much sleep is in the highest good for us to get. And for me, this practice is very helpful, and just honestly, it calms my thoughts and calms my nerves, because I just trust the fact that, okay, I've asked for however much sleep's in the highest good for me to receive. If it's 8 hours, that's great. If it's less, then hey, I guess I was supposed to I guess I needed less sleep tonight, you know? And I don't make it an issue if I didn't get as much sleep as I expected to, or as much as I had wished initially. So that's a practice that, however it looks for you, whether it's prayer, meditation, whatever, can be a really nice, just kind of routine to get into.
Totally. And it's only been maybe a year or so that we've been really devoted to this practice and just made it a real routine. And I must say that there is power in speaking out loud these sort of prayers, requests, intentions. And one thing that I want to put in addition to this is that one thing that we do usually before this sort of calling upon angels, prayers, meditations, requests, intentions, is that we share our gratitude and our appreciation. Because when we come into a state of gratitude and appreciation first, then our prayers and intentions are coming from a really pure space. They're not coming from a space of needing something, needing to fix something. We're acknowledging that we're really grateful for all that we have, and we're just filled with gratitude and a peaceful night's rest that provides inspiring dreams and allows us to be connected with our purpose and allows us to move forward in service of our own personal lives and our destiny, and in service of the healing and support and the evolution of others on this planet. We just, come from this space of overflowing gratitude, and not from, oh Lord God, please help me fall asleep. And I think, I feel differently in my body when I say it one way or I say it another way. Anything else?
Well, we can also just mention there are some herbs and nutrients that are helpful in downregulating the sympathetic nervous system.
And notice that we waited until 28 minutes into this conversation to bring up any sort of exogenous supplement.
Oh yes, but actually before we talk about herbs and supplements, I do want to speak to removing any agents that do upregulate the sympathetic nervous system, mainly coffee.
Duh.
And even if you're someone that doesn't feel like the jitters after you have a cup of coffee, it can still affect you 10, 12 hours later in the day.
Totally.
Depending on how fast you metabolize caffeine. I know that for me, if I even have a cup of decaf coffee, I will not fall asleep until, 2 hours of laying in bed.
Because the liver has to do its thing with caffeine, and everyone has different levels of enzymes that do away with caffeine and process the caffeine. So everyone's unique, but some people, like Susanna, are really affected by caffeine.
Coffee.
Coffee.
I'm fine with tea.
So cutting that stuff out is important. If you have any sleep issue, just try it for a few days or a week. It's not necessary. So many people are so addicted, and if you want to talk about addictions, we can do that another time.
Yeah.
But so cut out that stuff if you need to, and on top of cutting out that stuff, we can add things like nervine agents, specifically things like chamomile, passion flower, lavender, valerian, skullcap, linden.
That's a good list.
That's a good list.
Avena. Yeah, that's a great list.
Melatonin, which is something that we talked about. Some people do benefit from supplemental melatonin. especially night shift kind of people. But start with the basics. Come on, people.
Magnesium is
Yeah.
a mineral that's helpful in calming people down.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we said, we start with the sleep hygiene and some of these mental, psycho-spiritual kind of practices as well.
Yeah. So on that note, thanks for tuning in. And if you are listening to this on the podcast, I would so appreciate subscribe, rate, review, let us know what you think, give some feedback. If you're listening on Instagram and or Facebook, you can know that you can also listen to other episodes that are on the podcast page, altered.health/podcast. And thanks again. We'll see you next time.
See you next week.
Lots of love.